Is mystical Ariel here to shake the matrix, expand our minds, and, of course, make us all think. How are you guys doing? I know I have missed a couple, but understand right now, the physical being has been going through some challenges with the health. And sometimes, basically, I am not capable of being on here to teach, which makes it important to listen to the body and rest and let it do what it needs to do. So, the thing is here, we all have a time in life where we transition, whether we transition to new existence, new creation, or we transition into awareness, all kinds of things. But today I want to discuss something very valuable and important. Who is looking back in the mirror at you? Now it's time for us to really take a depth into the internal existence that is really where original blueprint of our designs really exist. So take a breath with me. And just let yourself arrive. Let your shoulders fall for just a moment. Let the body settle. And here, this is not a place where you have to perform. No. You do not have to prove yourself here. You don't have to prove who you are. And you don't have the right words anyways. You do not have to be perfectly healed to be here. And you do not have to have everything figured out to be here at all. You only have to be willing to sit with one simple question. Just one. One simple question. Question that can change the entire way you see life in itself. And the question is this. Who? Who is looking back at me in the mirror? Not what your name is. Not even what you've been through. Not what you do. Not what religion you are or follow. And not what people think about you either. You're not even what happened to you. And not what you have even accomplished matters right here. Not even how old you are matters here. Not what role you play in society or this existence. None of that matters here. But what matters here is who is looking back at you. Who is the person beneath the name? You know, who is this beneath, this being right here, beneath all the roles and titles? Who is the awareness beneath the memories? Who is the life beneath the story? Because most of us have lived our entire lives looking into mirrors. But we have not really looked and seen ourselves. We look in the mirror and we see the body, right? Yeah. We see the body. But do we see anything else? You know, we see the body, we see the face. Oh, and we see the age. Because, you know, time put construct on us. You know, time doesn't even exist. Oh, and we see the scars. You gotta see that story. The scars are part of the story, right? You know? Then we see the weight, or the lack of. And we see the skin. We see an identity. We see what we think is beautiful. We see what other people taught us to judge. Oh yeah. We were taught to judge. See, we were taught to see people. We see the person we were told to become. Or we see the people that we're told they are. We see the person, we have been trying to escape. Oh, yeah. And then we turn away. But this morning, we're not turning away. No. We're going to stand. We're going to stand before the mirror today. The mirror of consciousness. Hey. And we're going to ask this question. Who is this person that I have been calling me? Who is it? Because before you ever knew who you were, the world began to name you. Yeah. They began to... Before you could even speak. Someone was already speaking over you. And before you could choose someone was already assigning a role to you, who you are. Even before you could understand love, you were being taught what you had to become in order to receive that love. Why are we taught that we have to become something when we already are all those things? And for many of us, that was never a gentle teaching for us. For many of us, love became attached to performance. Love became attached to obedience. Love became attached to silence. Love became attached to achievements. Love became attached to being useful. And love became attached to being strong. Love became attached to not having needs. And love became attached to not having needs. Love became attached to not asking questions. And love became attached to becoming whatever somebody else needed us to be. And then we grew up. And we called it identity. But sometimes identity is not who you are. Sometimes identity is simply the costume you learn to wear in order to survive. So this morning, we're going to peel back that costume. Not because the costume is evil, not because your story is worthless, not because your body does not matter, but because your name is meaningless. So, it's not because your name is meaningless, but because you're none of those things. None of those things are even who you are in the end of the game. Yeah, you have a name, but you are more than that name. You have a body, yes, but you are more than the body. And you have history, but yet you are more than your history. You have wounds, but you are more than what wounded you. You have identities, but you do not have to become trapped inside them. That is the journey tonight and this morning, is for you to recognize that it's not about that escape. It's not abandoning the body. It's not denying pain. It's not pretending death. It is not real, but becoming awake enough to stop treating the temporary form as the entire truth of who you are. So take another breath with me for a second and say this quietly. I am willing to see beyond the identity I have been given. That's right. I am willing to see beyond the identity I have been given. See, the world is full of boxes. Some are obvious, some are hidden. Some boxes are handed to us by family, some by religion, some by culture, some by schools, some by politics, you know. Then we got social media. Oh, yeah. And trauma. And some of it by relationships. Some by the things we were told when we were too young to know that people were speaking from their own wounds. The wounds say, be this. Do not be that. Look this way. Look that way. Do not look that way. Love this way. Do not love that way. Believe this. Must look this way. Must dress this way. Do not question that. Stay here. Do not go there. Act like this. Do not be a man this way. Be a woman this way. Be a spiritual this way. Be successful this way. Be acceptable this way. And when you do not fit in the box, the world often makes you feel like something is wrong with you. But maybe nothing was ever wrong with you. Maybe the box was too small. Maybe your soul was too wide for the identity people tried to put around you. Maybe your sensitivity was never weakness. And maybe your question were never rebellion. Maybe your difference was not a problem to solve. Maybe your refusal to fit in was nothing than the beginning of your awakening. Because the truth is, a box is only comfortable when you have forgotten that you can stand. You know. And if you can stand, you can stand. A cage is not only normal when you have never remembered the sky. And so many people have spent their whole lives in cages they call normal. They call it normal to hate themselves. Is you a European? No, I'm a rainbow. A cage is only normal when you have never remembered this. And so many people, we have spent their whole lives in cages, and they just recognize it and call it normal. And they call it normal, and they call it normal to hate themselves. They call it normal to compare themselves to strangers. Society calls it normal to work until their bodies break down. They call it normal to stay in relationships where they cannot be themselves. They call it normal to be afraid of future every day. They call it normal to ignore their own intuition. They call it normal to seek validation outside themselves, and they call it normal to stay silent when their soul is screaming. And they call it normal to live everyone else's life. But I want you to understand something. Normal is not always healthy. Normal is not always true. Normal is not always freedom. Sometimes normal is simply the most common form of disconnection. Sometimes normal is generations of people passing down fear and calling it wisdom. Sometimes normal is a culture built around distraction and calling it success. Sometimes normal is a religion built around shame and calling it a holiness. And sometimes normal is a family system built around silence and calling it peace. An awakening begins when you say, I do not want to be normal if normal means abandoning myself. And that is not selfish. That is not rebellion. That for the sake of rebellion. That is not ego. That is remembrance, because the deepest part of you knows when you are betraying yourself. Your body knows. Your nervous system knows. Your breath knows. Your dreams know. Your exhaustion knows. And your anger knows. Your sadness knows. And your anxiety knows. But sometimes the very thing you are trying to get rid of is trying to tell you you have been living too far away from yourself. Hi. And I mean, think about that. Sometimes anxiety is not proof that you are broken. Sometimes it is a signal that you have been carrying too much. And sometimes depression is not proof that you are weak. Sometimes it is the body saying, I cannot keep living this way. Sometimes anger is not something you are to be ashamed of. Sometimes anger is the boundary you were never allowed to have. And sometimes grief is not the failure of faith. Sometimes grief is love refusing to become numb. So we do not have to shame what rises in us. We have to learn how to listen, not to obey every feeling, not built on identity around every feeling, but listen and ask, what is this trying to show me? What is my body saying? What is my soul saying? What is identity am I trying so hard to protect? What role am I exhausted from performing? What old belief is still running my life? What voice inside of me does not actually belong to me? Sometimes normal saying hello to people. I said hello to you. Because some of, and I don't take manipulation well, so don't do it here in there. Because I literally come on here with literally, I don't care where it goes, honestly. And I know that it'll go to those who are actually ready to have change in their life, that want to see who they truly are and are tired of living this false existence. Because the reality is, this being is transitioning to another existence of life. And it's here for what it's here for. And no matter what you say or do, doesn't stop it from doing what it needs to do. I'm not like typical people. I'm more like the honey badger and just don't give a shit. I'm more about you looking in the mirror and seeing who you are. That you don't need me to validate you. Because some of you keep living under a sentence that was spoken to you decades ago, will make you look for validation somewhere. You'll never make it. You are too much. You are not enough. You are stupid. You are difficult. You are a disappointment. You are unlovable. You are a sinner. You are broken. You should be ashamed. You will never change. And you may not hear those words from the people who said them anymore, but you hear them over and over again inside your own mind. And you have become the voice that once wounded you. And that is how the prison continues, not because the person is still in the room, but because their words become part of your inner world. And they left the room. But the program stayed. They moved on. But the belief system stayed. They forgot what they said even. But your nervous system remembers every single word. And this morning, we begin to separate the voice from the truth, and we begin to say, just because I learned it does not mean it is true. Just because your family believed it does not mean it is true. Just because your church believed it does not mean it is true. And just because your culture repeated it does not mean it is true. And just because it has been in your mind for 20 years does not mean it is true. A thought can be familiar, feel familiar, and be false. A belief can feel safe and yet be limiting. An identity can feel solid and still be a cage. And you are allowed to question it. You are allowed to question the story. You are allowed to question the label. You are allowed to question the voice. You're allowed to question the role. You are allowed to question the entire life you built around trying to be accepted. That is not failure. That is courage. Now, let's talk about the identity we create through survival, because most of us were not born performing. We learn performance. We learn It because something in us believed we had to learn safety, we had to learn love, and we had to learn approval, we had to learn belonging. And maybe you become the funny one, maybe you become the quiet one, maybe you become the strong one, and maybe you become the caregiver, and maybe you become the achiever, and maybe you become invincible one, and maybe you become the spiritual one, and maybe you become the one who always had to answer, and maybe you become the one who never asked for help, and maybe you become the one who gave everything away so no one could accuse you of being selfish. And maybe you became the one who stayed angry because anger made you feel powerful. Maybe you became the one who stayed numb because numbness felt safer than feeling, And I want to say this gently, none of those parts are evil. None of those parts need to be hated. Those parts tried to help you survive and brought you to where you're at today. And the people pleasing part tried to keep you from being rejected. The perfectionist part of you tried to keep you from being criticized. And the angry part of you tried to protect you, your child who was never protected. And the numb part tried to keep you from drowning in pain. The anxious part tried to predict danger before danger arrived, and the controlling part tried to make the world feel safe, and the overachieving part tried to make you feel worthy, and the quiet part tried to keep you from being attacked. The loud part tried to make you sure you were never invincible again. So do not hate the parts of you that learn to survive. Thank them. And you can say this: thank you for trying to protect me, but then say, I do not need to let you control every moment of my life anymore. That is a different kind of healing. Healing is not destroying the parts of you that you're afraid of. Healing is becoming the love awareness that can hold them all. Healing is becoming the safe adult your younger self needed. Healing is learning to speak to the sacred part of you and say, I am here now. You do not have to do this alone anymore. And the nervous system changes through experience. It changes when it learns safety. It changes when you are treated with consistency. It changes when you learn to pause. And it changes when you begin to breathe through a trigger instead of immediately reacting. And it changes when you stop calling yourself names. It changes when you choose relationship where you do not have to perform. And it changes when you leave environments, when you learn boundaries. To change when you rest. It changes when you stop believing that chaos is love. It changes when you stop believing that abuse is normal. It changes when you stop believing that pain is your identity. And I know some people think awakening is all about leaving the body, but real awakening brings you back into the body. It teaches you how to feel your feet into the floor. It teaches you how to breathe. It teaches you how to hear your own voice. And it teaches you how to recognize, when something is unsafe. And it teaches you how to say no. And it teaches you how to return to the present moment of now. And awakening is not floating away from your humanity. Awakening is becoming the fully present inside your humanity, because you cannot heal a body you are always trying to escape. You cannot love a life that you are always trying to outrun. You cannot find peace while you are at war with yourself. So the invitation is not to leave your body. The invitation is to stop treating your body like the enemy. Your body has carried you. Your body has survived things you may not even have words for. Your body has held your fear. Your body has held your grief. Your body has held your joy, and your body has held your laughter. And your body has carried you through every season. And perhaps the body is not a prison. Perhaps the body is a sacred threshold and a place where awareness meets a form. A place where invisible becomes visible. A place where the spirit learns that what love actually feels like in flesh. And a place where consciousness gets to touch the earth. So this morning, thank your body. if you struggle with it, even if it hurts, even if it has changed, even if you have spent years judging it, just say, thank you for carrying me. You do not have to suddenly love every part of your body, but you can stop declaring war against it, and you can stop treating it like treat it as proof that you are unworthy. You can stop letting a mirror become a weapon, and you can begin to see the body as a temporary home through which life is happening. And that changes everything. Because some of the deepest boxes we live in are religious boxes. And I want to speak about this carefully. Religion has helped many people, yes. Religion has given people hope. Religion has given people community. But religion has given people songs, rituals, stories, generosity, service, prayer, and a language for a sacred. But religion has also been used to frighten the heck out of people. It has been used to divide people. It has been used to convince people that they are inherently unworthy. It has been used to make people afraid of their own questions. It has been used to create shame around the body, and it has been used to make people afraid of death. And it has been used to make people believe that God is some far off, angry, impossible, schizophrenic dude to know and always looking for a reason to reject them. And whenever a system requires you to hate yourself in order to belong, that system is not teaching love. Whenever a system requires you to silence your consciousness in order to belong, that system is not leading you in truth. Whenever a system tells you that questioning is evil, that thinking is dangerous, and that inner knowing cannot be trusted, you need to slow down and ask, who benefits from me remaining afraid? Because fear makes people easier to control. And if you are afraid of God, well, you're going to obey. And people who claim to speak for God, if you are afraid of punishment, you may accept things that violate your own consciousness. If you are afraid of being rejected, you may silence your own truth. And then religion becomes another identity box. It becomes another role. It becomes another performance. It becomes another way of saying, I am accepted because I believe in the right things. But what if the kingdom is not a reward for being in the right box? What if the kingdom is something deeper? What if the kingdom is not somewhere far away? But what if the kingdom is not only after death? But what if the kingdom is not owned by an institution? And what if the kingdom is not owned by anything? And what if the kingdom is the moment you finally recognize that you, the divine, was never separate from you? You are a spark of the divine, and that does not mean you are better than anyone else. It does not mean you are above accountability. It does not mean that you can harm people. It does not mean you do not need community, because we need community. And it means you stop looking outside yourself for permission to be connected to the sacred. It means you stop thinking that the divine only lives in rebuilding. You stop thinking that love requires some label and some title and some prayer. And you stop believing you have to become terrified in order to become holy. And you begin to understand the divine is breath life. The divine is creation. The divine is the courage to tell the truth. And the divine is the moment you stop hating yourself. And the divine is in the stillness that comes when you finally stop performing. The divine is in your eyes of another person. The divine is the tree. The divine is in the ocean. The divine is in the silence between the thoughts. And the divine is not something you have to go and chase. It is something you have to remember who you truly are. And that is why the system of external validation is so powerful, because if you remember that you are already connected to the source of all life, you become harder to manipulate through fear now. And you stop every outside system to tell you who you are, and you stop needing every person to approve you, and you stop giving your entire identity to a role, and you stop confusing obedience with truth, and you stop confusing fear with wisdom, and you become free enough to love real love. Not love that controls, not love that demands you to disappear, love that needs you to stay small, but the love that allows you to become more honest, more whole, more alive. And let's talk about death, because death is one of the greatest fears, keeps people attached to identities. I mean, we fear the end of the body, we fear the end of the story, we fear the end of the role, we fear the beginning, the being forgotten, and we fear losing the people we love, and we fear the unknown. And I want to say that this, with tenderness, grief is real, loss is real. But when we lose someone, we feel their absence, definitely. And when someone is no longer here, the love we shared with them can ache in ways that language cannot hold. And we do not need to minimize this. We do not need to call death easy. We do not need to tell grieving people that they should not cry. Tears of sacred are sacred. Grief is sacred. Grief is love meeting change. But panic is something else. Panic is the grief that death has the final authority over everything. And panic is the great belief that the form is the whole truth. And panic is the belief that because something changes, it has no meaning. And I want to ask you, what if the temporary nature of life is what makes it sacred? What if the fact that we cannot hold every moment forever is what what makes the moment precious? What if death is not only a wall? What if death is a threshold? And I'm not here to tell you that I can prove exactly what happens after the body dies, but I've gone through the experience, and I will tell you straight up, life is a mirrored image. Science has even solved the mystery of consciousness. Not completely, but it's seeing this. And I'm not here to make promises about the afterlife other than this. There is no death. You cannot create nor destroy energy, and you are pure energy. And even nature's transformation, the seed becomes the tree becomes the soil becomes life, and it never stops ceasing. Water rises into the sky, water returns to the earth, body always changes, the cells change, but the thoughts change, the memories change, the identity change, but what we call solid has always become something else. And perhaps the fear of death is intensified because we are so attached to this version of ourselves that we think that we have to keep it forever. But you have already died many times. The child you were is gone. The teenager you were is gone. The person you were before is heartbreak is gone. The person you were before awakening is gone. The person you were 5 years ago is gone, and not even recognize the person you are today. You might not even look the same. And something has moved through all of those changes. Something has witnessed all of those endings. Something has been present through the beginning and the end. And the question is not, how do I make sure nothing ever ends? Maybe the question is, how do I become so present that I stop wasting my life in fear of endings? Because if you live every day afraid of death, fear has already stolen part of your life. If you live every day afraid of change, you will not be able to receive what is changing you. If you live every day afraid of losing your identity, you may never discover who you are beneath the identity. So perhaps the greatest spiritual work is not to die before you die. It's not physically, but spiritually, is to let false identities die, to let the fear-based self-life die, to let the self that lives only for approval die, and to let the self that believes it is unworthy die, to let the self that keeps repeating the pain of the past die, and to let the self that thinks it has to control everything die. And in the death, something else rises, a quieter self, a truer self, a more compassionate self, a self that is no longer trying to prove its existence, a self that knows, I am here, I am not enough, I am part of something larger than fear. And that is not about becoming arrogant. It is not about saying you are above life. It is about realizing that you are not here merely to survive the system. You are here to awaken inside of it. All right? Well, peace and love.